Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, this is where we go beyond surface level astrology and actually break down the patterns behind people's behavior, especially the ones no one likes to talk about. In today's video, we're getting into something a little uncomfortable, but very real. Why people secretly resent you. Not openly dislike you, not obvious hate, but the quiet, unspoken tension you feel from certain people and can't always explain. We're going to break this down using your birth chart so you can understand exactly where this energy is coming from and why it happens. Here's what we'll cover. First, I'm going to explain the psychology behind resentment, why people feel it, and why they usually don't admit it, even to themselves. Then we'll get into the key parts of your chart that trigger this in others. Your rising sign, how your presence and energy come across immediately, and why that alone can make people feel intimidated or uncomfortable. Your sun, what you naturally embody, and how that can create comparison or insecurity in other people. Your Venus, how people perceive you socially, why you might be liked, but also quietly envied. Your Saturn, where people project their own insecurities and judgments onto you, and your Pluto, where your energy can feel intense, exposing, or even threatening to others without you trying. By the end of this video, you're going to understand not just who might feel this way about you, but why. And more importantly, how to stop internalizing energy that was never yours to carry in the first place. So if you've ever felt like people's energy toward you shifts, or like there's something unspoken underneath the surface, this video is going to explain it. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let's get into the video. I like to start off by saying, not everyone who smiles at you likes you. Not everyone who supports you really supports you fully. And not everyone who's around you is actually on your side. Some people, they quietly resent you. They don't say it, they don't confront it, they don't even fully understand it. But it shows up in subtle ways. Passive comments, lack of support, weird energy shifts, and distance without explanation. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes it has nothing to do with what you did wrong. It has to do with what you represent. And your birth chart, it shows exactly where and why you trigger that reaction in people. So today, we're not talking about hate, we're talking about unspoken resentment, the kind people feel but don't admit. Now, let's break down resentment and why resentment happens. Resentment isn't random. It comes from three things. Number one, projection. You reflect something in people they don't like about themselves. This isn't about you doing anything wrong. It's about you mirroring something they haven't accepted within themselves. For example, you're confident and direct. They call you arrogant or too much because they struggle to express themselves and resent that you can. Another example, you set boundaries easily. They say you're selfish or cold because they overextend themselves and feel taken advantage of. What's really happening is that they're reacting to a part of themselves they haven't developed or accepted. Number two, comparison. You represent something they feel they lack. This is where resentment comes from feeling less than around you. For example, you're naturally attractive or get attention easily. In response, they act supportive, but make subtle comments about your appearance, like, must be nice, you probably don't even try. Another example, you're successful or progressing in life. In return, they downplay your achievements. It's not that big of a deal. You just got lucky. What's really happening here is your existence highlights a gap between where they are and where they want to be. Number three, discomfort. You behave in a way that challenges their identity or expectations. This is when you don't fit into the role they expected you to play. For example, you don't people please. They then feel rejected or offended because they expect compliance. Another example, you question things or think independently. In response, they feel challenged or defensive because they rely on structure or control. What's really happening here is that you're breaking the version of you they were comfortable with. And astrology maps all of this perfectly because your chart shows how you naturally express yourself, what you prioritize, and what you embody without trying. And the problem is, what's natural to you is triggering to someone else. Now let's talk about why you might not notice it. Most resentment is subtle because people don't say, I resent you. They show it through behavior. Like downplaying your achievements, not supporting you the way you support them, acting distant when you're doing well, and giving backhanded compliments. And the reason you don't always catch it is because your chart also shows what you normalize. So sometimes you're not just attracting resentment, you're tolerating it. Okay, so let's get into your chart, starting off with your ascendant, your presence, and essentially your first impression triggers perceived from others. Your rising sign is your energy, your presence, what people pick up on immediately, and sometimes that alone is enough to trigger resentment. For fire rising, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, you don't just enter a room, you register. There's a presence to you, something immediate, noticeable, hard to ignore. You come off confident, self-assured, expressive, and comfortable taking up space. And the key thing, you don't ask for permission to be seen. To you, this is natural, but to other people, it can feel like you dominate the energy in the room, like you draw attention without effort, and that you're more comfortable being yourself than they are. And that creates an imbalance. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your presence highlights what they're not doing. And this is where the resentment comes from. It's not just that you're confident, it's that your confidence is visible. And visibility triggers comparison. So instead of them thinking they're just confident, people subconsciously think, why can't I be like that? Why do they get attention so easily? Why does everything seem to revolve around them? And instead of processing that internally, it turns into irritation. You might notice some micro behaviors. It might be subtle but real, such as people interrupt you more than others, your ideas get dismissed, then repeated later by someone else. You're labeled as too much, extra, or attention-seeking, or people assume you're trying to compete even when you're not. And the confusing part, you're just being yourself. But keep in mind, other people aren't consciously thinking, I resent you. It sounds more like they always have to be the center of attention, or they're a bit much for me, or I don't like people who act like that. But underneath that, it's discomfort with your level of self-expression. And the simple truth is that you don't create the resentment, you reveal their insecurity. Because your presence asks a silent question. Why aren't you expressing yourself like this? And not everyone is ready to answer that. And the uncomfortable part, the more you try to dim yourself to make other people comfortable, the more you lose the very thing that makes you powerful. So the issue isn't your presence. It's what your presence activates in other people. Next is Earth rising, Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn. When you enter a room, you stabilize it. There's something about your presence that feels grounded, contained, intentional, and in control. You don't rush, you don't overreact, you don't reveal everything at once. And to you, that's just how you are. But to other people, your energy can feel like you always have it together, that you don't get easily shaken, or you're emotionally and physically composed. And that creates a subtle pressure, because around you, people become more aware of their own lack of structure, their inconsistency, their impulsiveness, and their instability. And this is where the resentment comes from. It's not just that you're stable, it's that your stability is visible and consistent. You don't just talk about discipline, you live it. And that forces comparison. So instead of thinking they're just grounded, people subconsciously think, why can't I stay consistent like that? Why do they seem so in control? Or why does everything look easier for them? And instead of processing that as inspiration, it turns into quiet resentment. You might notice some micro behaviors. This shows up in subtle ways, like people downplaying your efforts, you're just naturally like that, or they assume things come easy to you, ignoring how much discipline it actually takes. Or they call you boring, rigid, or too serious, or they become defensive when you give advice even when it's helpful, because your presence highlights a standard they feel they're not meeting. But keep this in mind, they're not thinking, I feel insecure around them. It sounds more like they think they're better than everyone. They're too controlled, or they need to loosen up, but underneath that, it's discomfort with your level of self-discipline and composure. And the simple truth is, you don't make people feel inadequate. You make them aware of where they're inconsistent. Your presence quietly asks, why aren't you showing up for yourself like this? And not everyone wants to face that. And the uncomfortable part, people will call you rigid before they admit they lack discipline. They'll call you boring before they admit they lack consistency. So the issue isn't that you're too controlled, it's that your control reflects what they haven't mastered yet. For air rising, Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, you don't force connection, you facilitate it. You come off friendly, engaging, easy to talk to, and socially adaptable. You know how to move through conversations, read the room, and connect with different types of people. And because of that, people are naturally drawn to you. At first, you feel approachable, interesting, mentally stimulating. But over time, people start to notice something else. You don't fully reveal yourself. You shift depending on the environment, and you stay emotionally neutral longer than expected. And that creates confusion because they feel like they know you, but not deeply. And this is where the resentment comes in. It's not just that you're social, it's that you're accessible, but not fully available. You give enough to connect, but not enough to feel completely known. And that creates a subtle frustration. So instead of thinking, they're just private, people subconsciously think, why can't I fully read them? Why do I feel like there's a distance? Or why do they connect with everyone but not deeply with me? And instead of recognizing that as your natural style, it turns into resentment. You might notice some micro behaviors, and this might show up in subtle ways, like people getting frustrated when you don't open up quickly, or others assuming you're fake or two-faced, or people expecting more emotional depth than you naturally give, or being told you're hard to read or inconsistent. And the confusing part, you are being genuine. You're just not emotionally intense. But keep in mind, they're not thinking, I feel disconnected from them. It sounds more like something feels off about them, or I can't tell how they really feel, or they act different depending on who they're around. But underneath that, it's discomfort with not having full emotional access to you. And the simple truth is that you don't confuse people. You just limit how much of yourself they can access. And for some people, that lack of access feels like rejection, even when it's not. And the uncomfortable part? People will call you fake before they admit they don't understand you. They'll call you inconsistent before they admit they can't keep up with your range. So the issue isn't that you're hard to read, it's that not everyone is meant to fully read you. And water rising, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, you don't just sense energy, you absorb it. Your presence isn't loud, it's felt. You come off intuitive, emotionally aware, observant, and deep. You notice what's not being said. You pick up on tone, energy, subtle shifts. And most of the time, you don't even have to say anything. People feel it anyway. At first, you feel safe, understanding, and emotionally present. But very quickly, that feeling shifts into something more intense. Because around you, people start to feel seen in ways they didn't expect, or emotionally exposed, or like their guard doesn't fully work. Even if you're quiet, even if you're not asking questions, there's a sense that you already know something, and this is where the resentment comes in. It's not just that you're deep, it's that your depth makes other people aware of what they're hiding, and that's uncomfortable. Because most people are used to surface level interactions, emotional avoidance, and controlled self-presentation. But around you, that doesn't fully hold. So instead of thinking they're intuitive, people subconsciously think, why do I feel so exposed around them? Why do they see through me? Why do I feel uncomfortable even when they're not doing anything? And instead of processing that feeling, it turns into distance or quiet resentment. You might notice some micro behaviors, and this might show up in subtle but consistent ways, like people opening up to you, then pulling away, or others becoming defensive around you for no clear reason, or people assuming you're judging them even when you're not, or being told you're too intense or hard to read. And the confusing part? You're often just observing. You're not trying to expose anyone. But keep in mind, they're not thinking, I feel emotionally exposed. It sounds more like they're kind of intense, or something about them makes me uncomfortable, or I feel like they're always analyzing me. But underneath that, it's discomfort with being seen on a deeper level than they're used to. And the simple truth is, you don't make people uncomfortable, you make them aware of what they're not confronting. Your presence quietly asks, what are you hiding from yourself? And not everyone is ready to face that. And the uncomfortable part? People will call you intense before they admit they feel exposed. They'll call you hard to understand before they admit they don't understand themselves. So the issue isn't your depth, it's that your depth reveals what other people try to avoid. Next, we'll discuss your sun sign, which is what you naturally embody. And over time, that becomes an identity trigger for other people. So your sun is who you are without trying. It's your natural way of existing, your identity, your energy, what you radiate just by being yourself. And that's exactly why it triggers people, because you're not performing it, you're embodying it. And when someone sees you naturally express something they struggle with, it creates comparison. Not always consciously, but emotionally. So the resentment doesn't come from what you're doing. It comes from what you represent. For Aries Sun, you move with confidence and initiative. You don't wait, you act. The resentment is people feel like you're impulsive, selfish, or too aggressive. But what's hidden is that they struggle to take action in their own lives, and your decisiveness highlights that. Sun in Taurus. You're grounded, steady, and self-assured. You don't rush, and you don't fold easily. People resent that you're stubborn or unwilling to change. But what's hidden is that they struggle with consistency, and your stability makes them feel scattered. Sun in Gemini. You adapt quickly, you think fast, and you move between ideas and environments easily. People resent that you're inconsistent or not serious. But what's hidden is that they feel limited in comparison to your flexibility and mental range. Sun in Cancer. You're emotionally aware and protective. You feel deeply and you don't disconnect from that. People resent how overly sensitive or reactive you are. But what's hidden is that they're uncomfortable with their own emotions, and your openness brings that to the surface. Sun in Leo. You shine without asking. Your presence is expressive, visible, and hard to ignore. People resent that you take up too much space or want attention. But what's hidden is that they struggle to be seen, and your visibility reminds them of it. Sun in Virgo. You notice everything. You refine, improve, and analyze naturally. People resent that you're critical or hard to please. But what's hidden is that they feel exposed by your awareness even when you're not judging them. Sun in Libra. You're socially aware, balanced, and relational. You understand dynamics and how to navigate people. People resent that you're fake or overly concerned with appearances. But what's hidden is that they struggle with social awareness, and your ability to move smoothly through situations highlights that. Sun in Scorpio. You see beneath the surface. You don't accept things at face value. People resent that you're intense, secretive, or intimidating. But what's hidden is that they feel exposed because you pick up on things they try to hide. Sun in Sagittarius. You're expansive, honest, and free. You move toward growth, truth, and experience. People resent that you're careless, blunt, or non-committal. But what's hidden is that they feel restricted in their own lives, and your freedom highlights that. Sun in Capricorn. You're disciplined, focused, and long-term oriented. You take yourself seriously. People resent feeling judged, pressured, or intimidated by your work ethic. But what's hidden is that they feel like they're not doing enough, and your consistency reminds them. Sun in Aquarius. You think differently. You don't conform easily. People resent your detachment, distance, and unpredictability. But what's hidden is that they rely on structure and belonging, and your independence challenges that. Sun in Pisces. You're intuitive, imaginative, and emotionally open. You move beyond logic into feeling and perception. People resent that you're unrealistic, confusing, or too idealistic. But what's hidden is that they've disconnected from their own imagination or emotional depth, and your openness makes them uncomfortable. To wrap up the sun signs, every sun sign triggers something different, but the pattern is the same. You embody something naturally that other people feel disconnected from. And instead of recognizing that as inspiration, it turns into judgment or distance or quiet resentment. Next, I'll discuss Venus, which shows social resentment, likability, attraction, and comparison. Okay, so Venus is how people experience you socially. Not just romantically, but how you're perceived, received, liked, and desired. It's your charm, your appeal, your social energy. And ironically, This is where a lot of hidden resentment forms. Because Venus doesn't just create attraction, it creates comparison. And comparison creates insecurity. So people can like you, be drawn to you, enjoy your presence, and still resent you at the same time because of how you make them feel about themselves. Now I'll go through each Venus sign, beginning with fire Venuses, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius. You don't hide your presence, you're expressive, confident, and energetically noticeable. People feel your energy immediately. People resent you because they feel like you get attention without trying, like you're naturally seen, noticed, and desired. So people subconsciously think, why do they stand out so easily, or why do people gravitate toward them? You might even notice some micro-resentment behaviors such as downplaying your attractiveness, calling you attention-seeking, or acting unimpressed by you. But the core truth is, they don't resent your attention, they resent how naturally it comes to you. For Venus and Aries, you're bold, direct, and initiate attraction. People resent the way you move so confidently in love, like you don't hesitate the way they do. Venus in Leo. You shine in social and romantic settings. People resent how you get admiration and validation easily, and they question why you're the one being chosen. Venus in Sagittarius. You're magnetic and effortless in your charm. People resent how you don't need anyone, and that freedom makes them feel replaceable. Next, Earth Venuses, Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn. You don't just attract, you hold value. There's something about you that feels reliable, grounded, and worth investing. People resent you because you represent long-term desirability, not just attraction, but stability. So people think, why do they seem so put together? Or why do they always have something solid? You might even notice some micro-resentment behaviors such as minimizing your effort, saying you're too practical or boring, or acting like your standards are unrealistic. But the core truth is they don't resent your stability. They resent that you don't settle. For Venus and Taurus, you attract through comfort, presence, and sensuality. People resent that you have a natural ease and desirability they can't replicate. Venus in Virgo, you show love through detail, care, and attentiveness. People resent how they feel like they're being measured against your standards, even when you're not saying anything. Venus in Capricorn, you attract through structure, value, and long-term energy. People resent how they feel like they have to earn you, and that pressure creates insecurity. Next, air Venuses, Gemini, Libra, Aquarius. You don't force connection, you move through it. You're social, adaptable, and engaging. People like being around you. People resent you because it feels like you're liked without effort. Like you don't have to try as hard socially. So people think, why do people like them so easily? Or how do they connect with everyone? You might even notice some micro-resentment behaviors such as calling you fake or surface level, questioning your authenticity, or feeling like you're inconsistent. But the core truth is they don't resent your personality, they resent how easily you navigate people. Venus in Gemini, you're curious, playful, and mentally engaging. People resent that your attention shifts too easily and that makes them feel replaceable. Venus in Libra, you're charming, balanced, and socially attractive. People resent that you're effortlessly likable and they compare themselves to that. Venus in Aquarius, you're unique, independent, and socially intriguing. People resent that they can't fully have you and that lack of access creates frustration. And water Venuses, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. You don't just attract attention, you attract emotion. People feel something around you, connection, depth, intensity. People resent you because people feel drawn to you, but they don't understand why. And what they don't understand, they try to control, question, or reject. You might even notice some micro-resentment behaviors such as becoming emotionally reactive around you, pulling away after getting close, or accusing you of being too much. But the core truth is they don't resent your depth, they resent how deeply they feel around you. Venus in Cancer, you nurture and emotionally invest. People resent that they feel like you create emotional expectations they're not ready to meet. Venus in Scorpio, you attract intensity, obsession, and depth. People resent that they feel exposed, consumed, or emotionally overwhelmed by you. Venus in Pisces, you love unconditionally and see potential. People resent that they feel like they can't live up to how you see them, and that creates pressure. I'll now discuss Saturn in your chart where people project judgment onto you. To understand Saturn fully, you have to understand Saturn isn't soft energy. It's pressure, expectation, accountability. Saturn represents discipline, boundaries, maturity, and standards. And when people come into contact with your Saturn energy, they don't just see it, they feel it. Based on what house Saturn is placed in your chart, people may feel evaluated, measured, not quite enough, like they need to do better, even if you're not saying anything, even if you're not trying to create that pressure. Your presence alone can highlight their lack of discipline, lack of structure, and lack of follow-through. And where the resentment actually comes from isn't necessarily about you judging them, it's that your energy makes them judge themselves. And instead of processing that internally, they project it outwardly. So instead of thinking, I feel insecure around them, they think they're too serious, they're too hard on people, or they expect too much. And that turns into quiet resentment. You may notice this through micro behaviors, like people becoming defensive around you, dismissing your advice or perspective, calling you strict, cold, or intimidating, and resisting structure or boundaries when you introduce them. And the weird part, you might just be holding a standard. Now I'll discuss how you might experience resentment based on Saturn in each house. Beginning with Saturn in the first house, you naturally come off serious, controlled, and self-aware. People resent that you're rigid, guarded, or hard to approach, but underneath that, they feel exposed by your level of self-discipline. Because your presence says you're responsible for yourself, and not everyone is comfortable with that. Saturn in the second house. You value stability, self-worth, and long-term security. People resent that you make them feel judged around money, value, or priorities. But truly, they feel insecure about their own financial habits or self-worth. Your energy says, what you build matters. Saturn in the third house. You think carefully and communicate with intention. People resent feeling like they have to watch what they say around you, but truly, they just feel intellectually or verbally inadequate. Your presence says, think before you speak. Saturn in the fourth house, you carry emotional depth and internal structure. People resent that they feel uncomfortable with emotional responsibility around you, but what that really means is that they avoid their own emotional foundations. Your energy says, deal with what's underneath. Saturn in the fifth house, you take creativity, self-expression, and romance seriously. People resent that you make them feel restricted or judged in how they express themselves, but truly, they feel insecure about being seen or validated. Your presence says expression has weight. Saturn in the sixth house. You value discipline, routine, and consistency. People resent that they can't keep up with your standards. But what's hidden is that they struggle with consistency and accountability. Your energy says, show up every day. Saturn in the seventh house, you take relationships seriously. People resent feeling like being with you comes with expectations or pressure, but truly, they're just not ready for emotional responsibility. Your presence says commitment requires effort. Saturn in the eighth house, you approach intimacy, trust, and vulnerability with depth and caution. People resent that they feel blocked or tested by you, but underneath that, they're uncomfortable with true emotional depth. Your energy says trust is earned. Saturn in the ninth house, you take beliefs, truth, and knowledge seriously. People resent feeling challenged or judged for their perspectives, but underneath that, they're insecure about their worldview or direction. Your presence says, know what you believe and why. Saturn in the 10th house, you embody ambition, discipline, and authority. People resent feeling intimidated or judged by your success or drive, but underneath that, they feel behind or uncertain about their own path. Your energy says, build something real. Saturn in the 11th house, you are selective with friendships and long-term connections. People resent feeling excluded or not fully accepted by you. But underneath that, they fear not belonging. Your presence says, not everyone has access. Saturn in the 12th house, you carry quiet depth, internal discipline, and emotional complexity. People resent feeling like they can't fully understand or reach you, but honestly, they're just uncomfortable with introspection. Your energy says, face what's hidden. Saturn doesn't create resentment because it's harsh. It creates resentment because it's honest. It reflects reality, responsibility, accountability, and limitations. And not everyone wants to face that. So instead of facing themselves, they project it onto you. And to tie this up into a nice, pretty bow, it's important to remember that they're not reacting to you. They're reacting to how you make them feel about themselves. And Saturn is the planet in your chart that makes people confront what they'd rather avoid. And finally, the last part of your chart that can show where and why you receive resentment is none other than Pluto, the planet of intensity, control, exposure, and unspoken power dynamics. Pluto is where things stop being light and start becoming real, because Pluto isn't surface level energy. It's depth, power, control, and transformation. It represents what's hidden and what happens when it's brought to the surface. When people interact with your Pluto energy, they don't just feel connection. They feel exposed, emotionally affected, and seen beyond what they show. And like something is shifting underneath, even if you're not doing anything obvious, even if you're quiet. There's a sense that something deeper is happening. So resentment is birth, because Pluto doesn't just reveal others. It changes how they feel about themselves. People may walk away from interactions with you feeling more aware, more vulnerable, more emotionally affected, and they don't always like that, because transformation is uncomfortable. It forces people to confront their patterns, their fears, their lack of control. So instead of thinking, I feel triggered around them, they think they're too intense, something feels off about them, they're controlling, I don't trust them. And that turns into resentment. You might notice this through subtle but powerful micro-behaviors, such as people becoming defensive quickly around you, or others trying to assert dominance or control, or power struggles in relationships even when you didn't initiate them, and also people being drawn to you, then pulling away because they feel something but they don't feel in control of it. So if you have a strong Pluto placement or strong Scorpio placements like a stellium and strong Pluto aspects like Pluto conjunct your personal planets or Pluto in angular houses, you don't just connect with people. You impact them. Your presence creates emotional intensity, psychological depth, and unspoken awareness. You trigger resentment in people. People feel like you see too much, that you feel too deeply, that you affect them more than they're comfortable with. And that lack of control creates discomfort. The deeper truth is, you don't force transformation, but people change around you anyway. And instead of recognizing that as growth, they blame you for the discomfort. For example, Pluto in the first house or Pluto aspecting the sun. This is presence equals power. Your presence alone shifts the dynamic. You don't have to speak, nor do you have to act. People just feel you. This placement and aspect creates immediate intensity, strong reactions, positive or negative, and power imbalances without explanation. People feel triggered because they feel watched, sized up, emotionally affected, or not fully in control of themselves around you, and that creates a subtle fear because most people want to feel in control of how they're perceived, but around you, they don't. This shows up when you notice people trying to challenge or dominate you, or others becoming unusually quiet or guarded, or strong attraction mixed with resistance, and situations turning into power struggles quickly. The deeper truth is, they don't resent you because you have power, they resent you because they feel powerless around you. Another placement to highlight is Pluto in the 7th house, where relationships manifest as a power mirror. You don't attract light connections, you attract intensity. People feel triggered by you and resent that they feel consumed, tested, or emotionally pulled in deeper than expected. And when they realize the connection isn't surface level, they resist it. In all honesty, all they wanted was connection, not transformation. Lastly, I'll highlight Pluto in the 10th house. This is public power and visibility. If you have this placement, you carry a strong presence in how you're seen publicly. You trigger resentment in people because they feel intimidated, threatened, or overshadowed by your intensity or influence. But in all honesty, and what they won't say is that you represent power they don't feel they have. And I'll say this, Pluto doesn't create shallow reactions. It creates deep ones. Because it doesn't just show people who you are, it shows them something about themselves. And if they're not ready to face that, they'll resist it or resent it. And the uncomfortable part, people will call you intense before they admit they feel exposed. And they'll call you controlling before they admit they feel out of control. So the issue isn't your depth, it's what your depth brings out in them. Okay, so here's the part most people won't say. Resentment directed at you is not your responsibility, but it is your responsibility to be mindful and recognize it. Because if you don't, you'll keep repeating the same social patterns without understanding why. You'll keep overgiving to people who quietly compete with you. You'll keep explaining yourself to people who already decided to misunderstand you. You'll keep shrinking yourself to make other people comfortable. And you'll keep keeping people around you who don't actually like you just tolerate you. And over time, that will drain you. Not because you're doing too much, but because you're giving your energy to the wrong people. And the deeper truth is that your chart doesn't make people resent you. It reveals what you naturally embody, what you express without trying, what you represent in other people's eyes, and more importantly, what that activates in them. Because every placement we talked about, your rising, your sun, your Venus, your Saturn, your Pluto, is showing a different layer of your impact. How you come across, what you represent, how you're received, where people feel insecure, and where they feel exposed. So when someone reacts to you, it's not always about what you did. It's about what they experienced within themselves, in your presence. And once you see this clearly, you stop personalizing everything. You stop over-explaining. You stop trying to fix perceptions that were never accurate to begin with. And instead, you start observing and begin noticing who supports you genuinely, who feels uncomfortable around you, who subtly competes with you, and who can't celebrate you fully. And that awareness changes how you move. You become more selective, not cold, just aware. You stop trying to be understood by everyone. You stop needing approval from people who don't see you clearly. And most importantly, you stop dimming parts of yourself that were never the problem to begin with. So understand this, you're not too much. You're not doing too much. You're not the problem in every situation. But your presence does have an impact, and not everyone is comfortable with that. So, if you want to understand your chart on a deeper level, not just your signs, but your actual patterns, triggers, and dynamics, subscribe to this channel, like this video, and comment your placements below. I'll break down exactly what you embody, what you trigger in people, and how you're actually being perceived even when no one says it out loud. And if you want a personal birth chart reading, a synastry or compatibility reading, a future spouse reading, and any of my other in-depth astrology reports, head over to my website, astroclarityreports.com. The link is in the description box below. I'll see you in the next video.